Welcome to Reddit Source Box. We bring you the most sauciest and spiciest Reddit stories for your entertainment. The story of the day: what is the creepiest thing your young child has ever said to you? I was tucking in my 2-year-old. He said, "Goodbye, Dad." I said, "No, we say good night." He said, "I know. But this time it's goodbye." Had to check on him a few times to make sure he was still there. While changing my daughter in front of the open closet door, she kept looking around me and laughing. I asked her what was so funny. She said, "The man." To which I replied, "What man?" She then pointed at the closet and said, "The man with the snake neck." I turn around and nothing was there. I'm afraid to look into the history of my house to see if anyone hung themselves in the closet. At least she wasn't scared. I was sound asleep, and at around 6 a.m. I was woken up by my 4-year-old daughter's face inches from mine. She looked right into my eyes and whispered, "I want to peel all your skin off." The backstory here is I had been sunburned the previous week, and was starting to peel. In my sleep-addled state, however, it was pretty terrifying for a few seconds. I didn't know if I was dreaming, or what was going on. My co-worker's 4-year-old daughter always thought that the rattling of the water pipes in the kitchen cupboards were white wolves, and the sound always scared her. One day she was sitting at the kitchen table and she said, "Mom, the white wolves aren't bad. They're our friends." Her mom encouraged the idea by saying, "Yes. The white wolves are protecting us. They are our friends." Then her daughter added in, "They're our friends, but not the man who crawls on the floor and stands by my bed. I work in a preschool. The one that sticks out to me happened last year. There is a small kitchenette area in our classroom that the kids use during free time for playing house or whatever pretend games they think up. There was one little girl that I was keeping a close eye on, mostly because of how withdrawn from the other kids she was. I noticed she was playing with a baby doll in the kitchenette, rocking it back and forth and singing to it. She then took the baby, shoved it into the play oven and slammed the door shut. She turned around, looked straight at me, and said, "Sometimes bad babies go in time-out," in the creepiest little girl voice I've ever heard before, smiling and running off. That one kind of shook me. My 3-year-old nephew was at my cottage. He's asked me numerous times about the girl over there, while pointing at one of the back bedrooms. The place is small, and there is definitely nobody there, so I just dismiss it as a really active imagination. He has lots of imaginary friends. Then some friends are visiting and they have a daughter around the same age. She has never met my nephew. Twice in the one day she asked about the pretty girl, while pointing at the exact same room. Definitely caught me out and I didn't know what to think. Then at Christmas my family was over at my place and my nephew points at a picture of my wife and asks if she is coming to visit us here or does she just stay at the cottage. My wife died 10 years ago. Personally, I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, so it's probably just my logical brain putting together a bunch of kids' ramblings, but it definitely got my attention. When I was around 6 years old, we'll call him Joe for the sake of the story. Obviously, it was a very rough and emotional time for my dad. Joe was my dad's best man at his wedding, the one guy who was always there for him. After my dad got married, he and my mother left Joe and the town they were in to start a life outside of the town they grew up in. After years of moving around California, my family eventually moved to Utah, where my father worked for a successful internet business. Joe stayed behind in Washington. Because my family were so far away from their old life with Joe, there wasn't a lot of foresight, warning that Joe intended on ending his own life. Joe's sister apparently had been blaming Joe's wife for her brother's suicide. Joe and his wife drank a lot of booze, and probably as a result, fought a lot. My father always said that they were a passionate couple. Yes, they would fight often, but he hardly knew two other individuals who were so completely in love. For this reason, he didn't believe it. A few days after Joe committed suicide, his widow called up my father sobbing about how she thought it was her fault. After about an hour of trying to console her, he told her, "If there was a way for me to talk to Joe now, I guarantee you that he would tell you that he loved you, and that it wasn't your fault that he ended his life." Crying, she still didn't believe him, but she thanked him for the kind words and let my father go. My dad was obviously distraught after that long, hysteric conversation. He had been down in his office for a while, and he decided to come up and check on his kids while making a pot of coffee to take his mind off of things. We were all supposed to be napping, but he thought he'd peek his head into our rooms to make sure we were safe, maybe try to have a little smile or brightness added to his day. Sure enough, when my dad got to my room, I was fast asleep on my bed. He went to my brother's room, and he was also sleeping. Finally, he checks on my sister, who is sleeping as smugly as an angel. He decides to go back towards my room and into the kitchen to make some coffee. As he walks by my room, he notices a whimper. He turns around, and enters my room, where he finds me weeping. I was 5 years old, so the way I was crying seemed odd to him. Normally a 5-year-old would cry drastically over dramatically. I wasn't. I was just sitting on the side of my bed, weeping. My dad enters my room and says, "Matty, what's up? Why are you crying?" It's then that I stop crying for a moment, look up at him with teary eyes and say, "Rick, it's not her fault. I love her. It's not her fault." With that, I stopped crying, rolled over back onto my bed, and fell swiftly back to sleep. Needless to say, my dad craps his pants. My wife was getting my 2-year-old son up one morning. He was standing in his crib. As she said good morning and walked over to him, he picked up her shirt a little and crooked his head to the side. She asked him what he was doing and he said, "Looking for my baby sister in your tummy." She laughed it off as a weird kid imagination thing. We found out later that at the time she was 2 weeks pregnant and it was, in fact, a girl. We are due in September. We had never really had the talk about where babies come from, nor did we talk about having another child at all around him. So spooky. A good friend of mine and her husband bought what is considered an old house around here. Western Canada, not many houses over 100 years old. They were renovating the basement one day while I was visiting. I was down there alone with their son, who was barely 2 at the time, and could not yet speak in full sentences. He took my hand and led me over to a brick chimney-like thing with a rusty metal door on it. He looked up and said, "That's where the dead babies go." I was horrified. Firstly, because, like I said, the kid could barely talk, let alone say something like that. I doubt he even knew what dead meant. I'm positive that no one would have told him that, and there were no older kids around that would have said that as a joke. Still creeps me out to this day. When my daughter was around 4 or 5, we lived in a house that had been converted into 3 separate apartments. We lived in the basement portion. Because of the way they converted the house, there was a small recessed area under one of the stairways that formed a small closet storage space in her room. One night while she was getting ready for bed, I overheard her talking to someone in her room. I poked my head in and asked if she was calling for me. Her words, "No. I was talking to the little boy who lives in my closet. He's dead." Insta chills. When my son was in kindergarten, I received a call from his teacher while at work saying he refused to go outside at recess time and was sitting there terrified. He said there was a guy named OT who had brown hair and a brown beard who kept telling him to "come here buddy" over and over while he was playing outside before school started. They reviewed tapes and didn't see anyone. Scared the crap out of me that some man was trying to abduct him, but I'm pretty sure he either sees ghosts or has a very active imagination. He also said this guy talked to him at the bus stop or outside his window on the second floor. He also refused to go anywhere near an entire half of one of our old homes when he was 1 to 2 years old. He would just stand in the doorway and point. I don't have kids of my own yet, but my little brother did something that creeps me out to this day. He was around 3 when it happened. My mom called me from my room to grab her a towel so that she could keep an eye on both of my little brothers that were playing in the tub. I had grabbed the towel and was just walking into the bathroom when my 3-year-old brother, who normally had that adorable broken little kid speech, suddenly sat up straight in the tub, cocked his head and said in the most serious pronunciated voice, "Look Mom, I can't die." He had crossed his arms over his chest and slid underwater. It took a second for me and my mom to react, but she pulled him out pretty quick. He had inhaled a bunch of water and was crying, but he was okay. So fast forward a couple of years, we were replacing the trim in my little brother's room that was adjacent to the bathroom. We were tearing down the trim in the closet that adjoined to my parents' room, and we found an old penciled height chart on the wall where the trim was. There was only one kid named Alan, and the height chart stopped at the age of 5. The old lady that had owned the house before us had sold it to us so she could help take care of her husband in an assisted living home. She had mentioned on more than one occasion that they were the first owners of the house and had never had kids. So we did some research, and, thanks to the public library's amazing newspaper archive, found an article from the 1950s stating that the old couple had, indeed, had a kid. He had drowned in the tub in the same bathroom my little brother had his episode in. The conclusion in the paper followed somewhere along the lines that his mom wasn't supervising him in the bathroom when he had stood up in the tub, slipped, and hit his head. His name was Alan. I refused to even go in my parents' bathroom after that. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, it's very important to us.